playing some Thomas Was Alone. It's like a block platform, man. It's been out for a while. Thought I'd finally get around to play it. It's been on my wish list. It's like, why not? Let's get it. Oh my god, what is this? Oh, why is it just white? Just Jesus Christ.
The game's name, Thomas, was...
I can hardly hear the dude. Hold on.
Alone was, it was arrived upon by a friend of mine. Who sarcastically suggested I should call the game Thomas Was Alone because that's emo, and emos would like it, and emos post links, which was sarcastic and lame in a weird way, but also actually weirdly right. We found that people were associating the red rectangle at the start of the game with the name Thomas. So this is step one, side-to-side movement. If you're a platforming game fan, it should not present too much of a challenge to you. But here it's really just about easing the player into the way the world works. Seeing gravity for the first time, understanding how falling feels. And then actually kind of talking about that in the voiceover to kind of have a bit of fun with it. It's also introducing the idea of a narrator. Jumping had to be right. It's kind of the main way you interact in this game, obviously. I did a lot of research. I got kind of obsessive about it. It took me... I was still fiddling with the jump physics, I think, about 3 weeks before I launched the game. So it's something that I fiddled with. It had to feel right. And yeah, there's one problem here, actually, and we'll talk about problems on this as well. I think the biggest issue here was that the speech is a bit misjudged. It takes a little bit long to get through. So most players, when they play, this is a challenging jump. So this is a jump where the player can fail at it. So there's a gap, but I played a lot of Uncharted before making this level, and it's kind of inspired by those kind of scripted moments in games. I didn't do as many in the game as I kind of expected to at the start. There's a few reasons for that, but I guess the main one was that once the player... So this is a subtle one, but it's kind of important, and I know I'm talking a lot about game design introduction. This is by the way, this isn't like innovative in any way. This is Mario. This is every game you ever played. But I think it's kind of interesting to go through the steps. So here is kind of, we're extrapolating on precision. It's essentially we've done it in the previous level. We've made you do it, and here we're kind of queuing up a few of those. So if you fail at one, you can actually force yourself to go back a couple of steps in the progress. This is kind of the first time we're challenging the player, which is important, but it's important as well that it's not overwhelming. It's still very early days. I haven't yet shown you the kind of the differential. I didn't add respawning to the game until about a month before release. It's a classic example of something that every playtest I ever did. So basically, if you died in the game previous to a month before it came out, you were lighting. It's a weird one. The lighting. I didn't have lighting at one stage. There wasn't light. Then there was something a bit biblical. But as it went on, I kind of added that in. Initially, I was doing them by hand for every level, and basically this procedural system kind of came out of laziness. I didn't want to do that anymore.
Especially in the
and weirdly, as a side effect of that, it was cool, and the shadows moved and could be kind of related to placement of objects, placement of characters. And it was good. It's actually faked because the game was made in free Unity. I didn't have any shadows within the game kind of proper. So what I did was, okay, so this is the moving platform corridor. This was an attempt to bring in something that's going to become very important in a very short amount of time, the moving platforms. It's really hard to introduce moving platforms because moving platforms move, and that makes them challenging and makes them a kind of complex interaction. So what the corridor here allows me to do is introduce you to the idea that sometimes the ground moves, but in a way that doesn't actually kind of impact you too much and won't cause you, hopefully, to get too stressed out. People seem to like it. It's kind of a bouncy castle level. This is the most important level in the game. This is the point where I basically get to the point. And arguably I should have done it a little bit sooner. However, this is where it is, and that's fine. So this is the point where the player has to learn how to switch characters, which is kind of the basis of the entire thing, is this switching between the characters. This is also actually one of the first levels. This was a weird little accident, this level actually. There's on Thomas on the right there. As you move up, you're moving through trigger boxes. If you don't make games, trigger boxes are basically spaces you jump into or move into, and they cause something in the game to happen. So as you move up as Thomas, you're hitting these trigger boxes which cause the walls to come in. But as a really weird coincidence, I got one of the timings wrong, so that as you moved up, there's a certain point where it looks like you can jump somewhere, you jump to it, and the wall flies out and hits you in the face. And it's kind of a funny moment. And I did it, and I thought it was funny, and it felt kind of organic. And I took it to, when I started showing the game to people, it happened to everyone. It's a weird thing that it seems to catch everyone out, even though there's nothing forcing you into it. 90% of the time people get hit in the face. And most of the time they laugh, so I left it in, and I'm really happy with it actually. It's one of those nice little coincidences that worked out really well. Steps. Everyone loved the steps. They didn't actually, and it's probably my biggest design regret in the game is. Steps basically are kind of obstacles that you have to jump over by kind of piling up a few characters in order to get through. That's fine. The problem with steps is that you have to do that repeatedly, that you have to essentially solve the same puzzle over and over again in sequence. And there's just 2 or 3 too many times I do that in the whole game, and it's frustrating to players. It sucks. I went through and this level's a great example of how useful playtesting is. This map was always very similar to this, but there was one major kind of design difference, was that the stepping stones at the bottom of the screen had had no wall below them, so they were floating over water, which meant that you could fail about 8 or 9 times here, causing you to get very frustrated and angry. And it wasn't a soft fail where your character fell through and you got back up and carried on. It was a cruel, harsh fail that reset the level. And my playtesters hated it. So this is a great example of the kind of thing that to me was invisible, because I understood how the characters moved and I was making them and playing them all the time. To me, it was a really easy sequence of stepping stones that you can get through first time every time. But once I went in front of playtesters, I got emails from people saying it was taking them like 45 minutes to get through this level because of that problem. So just sticking a wall underneath, I kept the water because it looked nice, but the sticking a wall under Danny I should have mentioned Danny a little bit sooner. He just does so much. It's a long story that I've told lots of places, but basically I wrote the story for him. I was trying to find a voice that would suit the game, and I was a big fan of his writing and his kind of audiobooks and radio stuff and all the things he does. And I wrote the part kind of with his voice in mind. And then I tried to find people who could do it, and no one could do it. And then I got drunk and emailed him, and he said yes, which was a bit of a shock. So I'm really chuffed. He did an awesome job. He's been really cool with the game. He's talked about it. He's been lovely, and he's just a really nice chap. He's also really fast. I'm recording this after recording some other stuff with Danny, and he's amazingly quick at what he does. I'm doing a much worse job, and the people in the booth are getting bored, I imagine, at this point. John's my favourite character. Well, I'm going to say that a few times because I've got quite a few favourite characters, but John I really in particular like. He's insecure in a weird way. I'm not entirely sure why he is, but he is. And that leads him to kind of be dishonest and narcissistic, which I think a large number of creative people will associate with. I know I do. and he's so he's really, this is another level actually from the original Flash game, which obviously I tweaked and kind of brought across. I really liked the idea of confined spaces as applied to this game, because with large spaces, having multiple characters with different abilities kind of hopefully feels kind of empowering, feels like you can do anything and get anywhere. Putting them into a confined space kind of becomes an interesting kind of jumble. They get in each other's way, they trip over each other. This level exists solely to allow the player to feel their way into John. This is a chance for you to basically make him jump properly for the first time.
One thing I've noticed with a lot of good games, and this is good for what it is when the developers immediately say stuff like, we wanted to know if the player, they're always saying that, like, we want the player to feel this, we want the player to feel that. That's a green light for a developer. That means, hey, they're asking the right things. Hopefully because of the constraints in the last level, that feels awesome. And I actually use the word awesome in the narration just to push you in case that's not how you're feeling. You should, it's a very good game. And then, so you've now got access to this awesome jump, and you can do what you feel.
John decided to press the switch to let the little dots catch up with him. John cared for his new allies. You could tell from the sympathetic expression he practiced in the mirror all these years.
Turn the music down a little bit. It's kind of loud, man. Like, damn.
This level exists solely to allow the player to feel their way into John. This is a chance for you to basically make him jump properly for the first time, and hopefully because of the constraints in the last level, that feels awesome. And I actually use the word awesome in the narration just to push you in case that's not how you're feeling. You should, it's a very good game. And then, so you've now got access to this awesome jump, and you can do what you feel.
John cared for his new allies. You could tell from the sympathetic expression he practiced in the mirror all these years.
I think this is this is getting very self-deprecating, but I think this is the weakest level in the game. I came very, very close to cutting it. This is where the staircase repetition kind of becomes, well, boring. I did do a lot. I shifted things around, kind of varied the step sizes and gaps and to add variety, but it's a lot better than it was, but it was not. It's the one that when I'm watching Let's Plays, and I'll talk a bit more about Let's Plays in a bit, but the way it's kind of the one that I fast forward through on the Let's Plays because I find it very very, very slow. I don't know, that might just be over familiarity, but I don't like this level. Have fun with it though, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, I know what to do. I know what to do. I see what he's talking about now. Because it is a bit repetitive in terms of this. You're doing the same thing with no change. As you say, get up and downstairs.
He didn't mind them so much either. The red one, Thomas, had a charming way of applauding every time John jumped.
No, we're going back.
The angry orange one was less immediately likeable, but his unremitting cynicism and tutting amused John.
So this is the last. This is actually the last level of the demo. So it's kind of important for that reason. But the kind of the big design lesson here, and you'll notice I guess like the portal success. So previously all the portals have sat.
Did he
on
say it's
a
the last
static
level of the
ground.
game?
So you queue someone up, you queue someone up, you queue someone up. With this one, you have to finish this level by having Thomas falling through that portal. And it's hopefully it's kind of safe. If you miss your timing or you get him through early, you always catch back up with yourself. So it doesn't punish you if you don't get it immediately. but it's something I really wanted to do later on, and there's quite a few places where I play with this idea. So yeah, it's that basically. It's a way of introducing that, and hopefully kind of hints at the possibilities if you're playing the demo of kind of where the game can continue on from there. Claire is all about the setup. To buy the fact that she actually thinks that swimming is a superpower, you kind of have to set her up before that as feeling weak. And Claire's not weak. She's not a weak character. She's not rubbish at jumping either. That's something she says. She's on a par with a lot of the other characters. But that insecurity hopefully kind of warms you to her, and you're with her at the point where she realizes she has that superpower. You feel excited because you want a nice thing to happen to that character who you kind of had a, not pity, but kind of a sensitivity towards. What's really interesting with Claire is in a lot of the reviews and the kind of the chatter about the game that happens online, people say that Claire is fat and that she's insecure about being fat. Which is really odd, because I never thought of Claire as fat. She's big because she has to carry characters later. That's the kind of a design concern. And at no point does the script mention her weight or even that she has a physical insecurity. And that's kind of weird and odd, but it's also absolutely awesome, because if players are kind of coming to the game and placing these meanings on it without kind of me telling them, that's cool. It's really interesting. Whenever fan art's done, she's the big boned character, which is fascinating. And I like that players have kind of built their own little story on top of her. So exactly the same way as with John, I kind of really enjoyed the idea of introducing a swimming character and then having a level that you couldn't swim in. So there's that, and just me being cheeky again, basically. But the big lesson here is the idea of getting Claire to carry another character. So there's one point right at the start of the level, you have to get John to carry Claire. You have to, there's no way of completing the level without doing it, which was cool, and kind of introduces that idea of carrying someone along. And then you've got an optional, you can do it over the stepping stones straight after, with Claire underneath and John on top. Surprisingly, a lot of players don't do that. I don't know if they don't see it, or they kind of, they don't make that leap yet. But hopefully that idea's been implanted, because that's very useful later on. And I said it was useful later on. It's useful immediately after, which is this level, which is the payoff where you carry characters back and forth. I also really like the whole the fox chicken grain logic puzzle, and it's kind of Thomas's little nod to that. It's just something that people hopefully kind of will work out and kind of start to see what Claire can do and start making, start planning out with that ability in mind in later puzzles. This is probably the most showy level. This is epic. This is the one that always goes in the trailer. I stole Rain from the method for doing Rain from Quick Fingers, this is probably the most showy level. This is epic. This is the one that always goes in the trailer. I stole Rain from the method for doing Rain from Quick Fingers, who's an awesome Unity dude who I'm now fortunate enough to work with. And it's cool. It's a big epic moment. This is much like those falling platforms earlier on. This is kind of one of those big. This is probably the most showy level. This is epic. This is the one that always goes in the trailer. I stole Rain from the method for doing Rain from Quick Fingers, who's an awesome Unity dude who I'm now fortunate enough to work with. And it's cool. It's a big epic moment. This is much like those falling platforms earlier on. This is kind of one of those big semi-scripted sequences, because the pace is defined by the water, so therefore I know that if a player's surviving, they are playing through a certain speed. And it's cool. It also builds on the idea of carrying from earlier, but this time under pressure, so you have to move quicker and you haven't got time to think. And if you try and get Thomas off of Claire, you're going to run into problems very quickly. So there's that as well. So it's hopefully kind of a nice way of solidifying all the learning the player's done about Claire up to this point.
Is she more the lone Avenger type? She'd like that. the sole hero in a world of rectangles and conveniently placed pools of toxic water.
Steps. I'm so sorry. On the upside, two things. One, I changed the shape of the steps, which I feel kind of massively improves them. And two, I then sarcastically make a joke about steps in the script. So you can laugh with me at my lack of design ideas up to this point.
Claire wondered why the world made it so difficult.
This is one of my favourite levels. What's nice about this level is it breaks the thinking and learning you've done up to this point. So up to this point, I've been teaching you that Claire is for carrying other characters. If I'd not done that, this level would be a lot easier. It's because you've been told to carry characters for every level up to this point. Your automatic reaction to a body of water is to jump Claire in and pile up all your characters, and that's not the solution. I love the fact that this puzzle kind of only exists in the head of the player. And it's great watching, Let's Plays, and when I was doing playtesting and taking it to events and stuff, that you actually see people performing the places in the game. I managed to pull that off, but I'm really, really happy with this one.
These guys would go on to make after this. Yeah.
Man, that music. David came in. Well, actually, he came in pretty early. Basically, the original Flash game had no music, and one of the biggest criticisms was that there was no music. There were no sound effects either. So I had to get someone, and I kind of fortunately found David through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. And he did a cool little demo, which is now actually over the end credits. And he was awesome. I got him in. He wrote this amazing piece of music for each kind of chapter of the game. Basically, the way we worked is I would send him kind of the emotional script for the game of how the character's feeling, what's the setup here, and he'd work from that and kind of build a piece of music. About halfway through development, I made his life a lot harder because I decided I wanted a randomized procedural system. So you'll never hear the game too obviously loop. They're basically little sequences of music that kind of get piled up in interesting ways. And he was really good. He was really good with that. He split up what he'd already made and made it work, and then every track from that point on used that system really, really well. So he was really adaptive, and he's awesome. And he's like 14. Well, he's not 14, but he's very young, and it frustrates me how talented he is. I had a really good time working with him. So thank you, David. So this is an attempt to do a puzzle with kind of multiple solutions. This again was one of the very early levels I made. It was more of a kind of a test level originally, just to kind of check that all the characters were interacting correctly, the platforms were working the way I wanted them to. And it's cool because everyone has a different way of doing it. There's lots of ways of optimally doing it, but then there's lots of ways of also doing it in kind of cool show-off ways, which is nice. It's a good chance actually to talk about the backgrounds. So the backgrounds I was going to do kind of, much like the shadows, I was kind of going to do specific bespoke level backgrounds, and it was working all right. They didn't look great, mainly because I just wasn't spending enough time on them. This is a 100 level game, and it just wasn't working. So in the end, I did kind of a procedural system. So they're freeze-framed particle effects. So basically, I draw them all off from a batch of images, place them at different parallax depths, and just go with it. So hopefully that kind of gives everything a nice texture, and I think it brings all the levels together, and it means that every time you play a level, it looks a bit different, which is fun. This is where I introduce spikes. I needed a hazard. I needed two things. I needed a hazard that Claire couldn't get past, so not water, basically, something that she could get hurt by. And I also needed a hazard I could put on ceilings. I did actually try, because it's all in a virtual world. I was like, oh well, it's fine. I'll have upside down water, and it looked rubbish, as I'm sure you'd expect. So the spikes got added. I introduced them specifically just with Claire, just so you can, as a player, learn that Claire is actually going to be damaged by them, and it kind of just changes the relationship a little bit between Claire and the environment, and hopefully in a safe way. This level's pretty straightforward. I've got two versions of the commentary for this level. The first version is that, from a narrative perspective, I needed to establish that there was an intelligence to the system you're in, that there were negative forces, and I needed to disrupt the flow of play in order to make you aware that that was there. So a glitch kind of made a lot of sense, and it's kind of something the Matrix does deja vu quite a bit to kind of show you that something's been changed, and that was cool. The other version, and the more honest version, was that I had a very near deadline in order to take the game to a festival, and I had to have another level. I don't know why I'd set myself an actual kind of level count. No one was judging me or questioning me. 29 levels would have been just as good as 30 levels, but I did, and this was a nice way of reusing that map. Once I'd made it, I kind of assumed I'd always remove it, but once I'd made it, I actually thought this was quite cool, and there's a few little tweaks. So the moving platform moves a little bit faster, and obviously Thomas is there. So I kind of liked actually reusing the same space with different characters as kind of a way of twisting a puzzle. I didn't want to do it too many times in the game, because I figured, people would just feel I was being a bit cheeky and not making enough content. But it was a nice thing to just do once, and to just see how that mixed things up. It's only as we record these that I'm realizing quite how much I played the new character, but you can't use them properly yet card. I do it all over the place. So in this moment, this is obviously Laura is introduced and deliberately separated out from Chris. It's nice because it lets us kind of learn who Laura is before we start interacting with her, and kind of it gives some context to the interaction that she has with the characters later. So that's hopefully quite fun. I do this far too much, and I need to not do this in future projects. Not as much.
As long as
His
he didn't find out what she could do, which would never happen so long as they stayed separate.
Pixel clouds were something I worked on early on. It was one of those weird ones where I had the idea for it kind of art-wise before I actually kind of worked out how to use them in the game itself. So I thought it would be cool to have these. Okay, so this level is, again, it was a kind of a test level that I made that kind of later became something that was actually really useful and interesting in the game. The point of this level really is just to get you used to the idea that Laura changes people's jump heights. That's basically it. It's done earlier in the portal placement. You hopefully kind of half got it, but I just don't want to assume that you did. So here you have to actually kind of work out that bouncing actually kind of helps you progress. It's nice. It kind of gets you to learn it. It's safe. There's no threats. And yeah, it's cool. I liked it. I thought it was nice. I also didn't realise actually at the point where I was making this level that Laura and Chris were a perfect match, and I kind of played with that a bit more as it went on.
What are the achievements like on this now? Okay. Finish the game 22% through. Die 100 times. Then I'll run through and get these once I finish the game because it'll unlock all the levels. Can I just give you right now? What does that? I'm gonna go get me some meat. Did it pop? How is that not 75 times? Let me look up. Thomas was alone. Let me see. I don't think you can do it.
I struggled to work out different puzzles involving Laura because basically she makes things jump higher. That's a limited kind of scope. And one of the very kind of the cool ideas I had, I think, with Laura was specifically to keep her separate from the play space, so she couldn't interact directly with characters, but to have enough of her kind of poke out of a wall or be available to the other players that they could interact and get a benefit from her. And it allowed me to do things like this level where you have kind of an indirect relationship spatially with between the two characters. And I really like it, actually. I think it's kind of interesting. I'd have liked to have done a few more of these.
Does that count as jumping? Oh, that did. Okay, bet. Let me see some. What are these pickups they're talking about? Is that what that is? I've been seeing those. I thought it was just background shit. Alright, news. The Bears just signed kicker Jake Moody. Are they retarded? No, like seriously, are the Bears retarded? The Bears are addicted to being stupid. I'll be honest. Carlos Santos, he does need to go. Um, and I keep seeing people defend him by going, "Well, he's 42 for 42 inside 40." Bitch, so is like 90% of kickers in the league. I think with how fast kicking has elevated in the last few years, Santos went from a top 15 solid kicker to now he's definitely bottom 15 for sure. It's just it's what it is, man. Let's play. Ooh, let's play.
She'd wonder what he was up to. Was he missing her? He wasn't saying very much.
So this is the first time that a cloud has actually appeared in the play space. It's impossible for you to actually interact with them because it flies away so quickly. But it's that kind of encroachment. It should hopefully feel that they're slowly but surely building up their interest and kind of like a wild animal kind of building up their tolerance of the characters, and they're getting closer and closer and encroaching more and more on the game space. So hopefully that's kind of building up a little bit. I want the tension to build up. I want the presence of those clouds to be more and more known as the game goes on. And obviously we're starting to hit a point where the characters are starting to talk about that threat, and that's coming to the fore a little bit. Chris and Laura falling in love was not actually part of the original, the kind of the structure I laid out online. I actually put up the entire kind of narrative arc of the game online like a year ago. And I wasn't planning on putting those two together in a relationship, but as I worked on both their arcs and worked out kind of the journeys they were both going on, it became more and more clear that the relationship was kind of a perfect way of illustrating both characters' growth. So Chris is realizing that other people aren't necessarily the worst thing in the world. So the idea of him forming a real relationship with someone is good for him for that purpose, to kind of show that. And with Laura, she's just learning to trust others, which again is something that hopefully a relationship kind of symbolizes for her. So that was it was kind of a late choice, but I think it kind of just gives both those characters a little bit more and lets the player see what's changing with them, which is cool.
He didn't want to scare her off.
Thomas was alone. God damn it, I'm trying to like oh my god. Wait, no. No. Fuck. Oh my god, I just fucked the level.
Chris and Laura falling in love was not actually part of the original, the kind of the structure I laid out online. I actually put up the entire kind of narrative arc of the game online like a year ago. And I wasn't planning on putting those two together in a relationship, but as I worked on both their arcs and worked out kind of the journeys they were both going on, it became more and more clear that the relationship was kind of a perfect way of illustrating both characters' growth. So Chris is realizing that other people aren't necessarily the worst thing in the world. So the idea of him forming a real relationship with someone is good for him for that purpose, to kind of show that. And with Laura, she's just learning to trust others, which again is something that hopefully a relationship kind of symbolizes for her. So that was it was kind of a late choice, but I think it kind of just gives both those characters a little bit more and lets the player see what's changing with them, which is cool. So this is one of the very first levels I made. Actually, this was something. It was experiential. This is something I've realised that a lot of the levels in Thomas, they weren't designed around a puzzle. They were designed around an activity that I thought would be quite fun to do. So here, for example, this is about kind of getting a sequence of bounces working and how that feels to the player, and having those little constraints on what you can do. It feels fun bouncing up, just managing to hit each of those buttons. The height of the ceiling is kind of hopefully perfectly judged so that it just feels nice. And it's cool, and I never really thought of it from a story perspective, but I thought the design was cool. What's really, really cool is as I start to watch more and more Let's Plays, and I watch every Let's Play. If you put a Let's Play of the game up, I've watched it at some point. Much
So watch that motherfucker
annoyance
be in
of
my
my
chat.
girlfriend.
He's like, I'm watching you.
And one thing that's happened in a few Let's Plays is
You think
people
just
see
'cause
a
you have no
story in this
views,
moment.
that
They
I'm not
see,
watching?
because Chris is
Always
separated
watching.
out, and John and Laura are hanging out, they see that as a moment where Chris is jealous. Which is really interesting, because it's, again, not something I'd thought of, much like the Claire obesity issue. That sounds like a great movie. That could be a good thriller, the Claire obesity issue. I like that. Sorry, I'm going off topic. So it's nice that people kind of saw a relationship forming, and they saw a meaning to the layout of the geometry in this level, which is cool, and kind of I think it means people were actually getting into the characters, which is really cool, really nice. So a lot like some of the other levels earlier on, this is a point where hopefully the player can kind of work out their own solutions to puzzles. They've got kind of an environment that goes through a loop, and they can kind of work out the way they want to approach it, and there are lots of different ways of doing it. The other big thing that's introduced here, I think, is the dotted lines. I think this is the first time you've seen them. The dotted lines were a problem that didn't really come up until this level, which was the idea of objects moving through barriers to the player. It's something that I hadn't really considered, and I'd not done earlier, and I didn't like the idea of them just moving through each other, because, I mean, that would work, but technically, but it wouldn't look right. It would look odd that a wall went into another wall. So I wanted something that kind of made a bit more logical sense. Dotted line feels almost like I guess it's weird. It makes more sense. It feels like a barrier, which is logical for the player, but it looks permeable. It looks like another thing could go through it quite nicely. So I'm really happy with that solution. It kind of didn't break the minimalism. It kind of felt logical, and yeah, I use them quite a bit throughout the game as the game goes on. It's a nice way of allowing me to move things in a way that doesn't necessarily feel logically real world-y.
The people who still constantly play Siege, bro, let it go. Just let it go, man. It's okay to acknowledge a game you once loved has fallen off. It's okay. I don't know if that's how you were supposed to do it, but
this is another revisit of an earlier level. So this is the idea of Water Rising. The difference here is there's way more characters, and you get to choose the tempo, and I like that. It feels like you're in more control, but also what it really does is it mixes up that tempo. So there are these slow moments where you're planning out how to hit the button, and then these kind of panicked moments where you've got to get the character back, otherwise they're going to drown. And I like that. This level of all the levels, this is the one. This is another revisit of an earlier level. So this is the idea of Water Rising. The difference here is there's way more characters, and you get to choose the tempo. And I like that. It feels like you're in more control, but also what it really does is it mixes up that tempo. So there are these slow moments where you're planning out how to hit the button, and then these kind of panicked moments where you've got to get the character back, otherwise they're going to drown. And I like that. This level of all the levels, this is the one where there's a nice kind of variation in the way the player plays and the way they emotionally react to it. So yeah, I like this level. It's cool. This is the Panic Room, is what I think the file's called. It's not got a name in the game. And the idea is that there's kind of these moving parts, and it seems much more scary than it is probably, and it's confined and small and just a single screen. And it just feels like a really nice shift from the other levels. It feels dangerous, and hopefully the player then kind of realizes that they can get through it, and they feel ownership of the level, which is the intention here. It's hopefully empowering.
It's a fun game.
As the fifth chapter of the game focuses on the characters kind of being removed one by one, the important thing here was to make sure the game stayed fun, didn't feel like a stretch. We weren't adding any more characters, for example. So this is where I kind of start to play a bit more with the environmental stuff, and I start to try and think about some different combinations of the characters and situations to put them in. The coloured switches, this is the first time they're in the game, I believe. They are there, well, they're there for a lot of reasons. To be honest, they're partly there just for me to cover myself. They allow me to lock off areas and make it so that one character can get somewhere but a second character can't. It's cool from that respect, because it makes puzzle design a little bit easier. And then there's hopefully a few places where that actually kind of serves the player and feels kind of nice and dramatic and more puzzling, essentially. It's a way of managing space to make some new puzzles. This is, much like everywhere else where I've added a new mechanic, again, a safe place. The coloured buttons you're going to work out by mistake, even because they're all there, all the different colours are represented, so you'd have to work very hard not to understand what was required of you in this level. It's hopefully a nice way of introducing that, and also kind of getting us started for the kind of the 10 levels where everything goes a little bit wrong. Like the idea, and I do it quite a few times in the next few levels, of environments that are more mechanical, so they shift shape, you press buttons in order to tweak the world around you. It's something I love in quite a few games, and it felt like a nice way of keeping things interesting without having to introduce new characters, as I said before. And also here specifically, I wanted to split the characters because there's quite a few characters at this point, and Thomas is kind of at its perfect kind of balance. I think around 4 characters. So these kind of places where there's way more than that, it felt like they needed to be split into 2 groups, just to hopefully to keep the game a bit more fun and those relationships a bit more understandable by the player. So that's what this level is basically splitting those out, and hopefully the effect that you have in one area with one group of characters affects the other, and vice versa a few times, which is hopefully fun.
Thomas could tell Chris was in love, and that was fantastic and everything, but that didn't mean they could let the doom cloud keep following them. Thomas was going to put his foot down once they got to the next level.
So Thomas is gone. Hopefully that kind of surprised players, because he's obviously the main character. So making him the first character to be removed kind of throws people off a little bit and kind of makes people wonder what's going on, which is cool. I also had to front load in these levels anything I wanted to do with lots and lots of multiple characters, because they're all getting picked off. Spoilers. I needed to make sure that anything I wanted to do that had lots and lots of different characters interacting was done right at the start. So this is an example of a level like that where multiple characters are working together in different formations. This wouldn't work later on in the game, so it's a nice chance to play with some of those ideas. thematically, Chris had to be taken by the Pixel Cloud on his own. He's going to grow and learn and be a lovely human being eventually. But for now, I kind of felt like it was important that he was still not quite there. He wasn't quite with the others, and he kind of was distant. And I kind of wanted that to be kind of symbolized, I guess, symbolized by the way he goes in the end. And that's cool. And then obviously around that came this awesome idea. I'm doing a lot of very arrogant statements during this particular piece of commentary. The rest of it's all very humble. The idea of him kind of falling through that environment is hopefully quite fun. That's what's cool about Thomas, because
Probably in the background.
because the world's so abstracted. I'm kind of free to just do silly stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would he fall? Who would make a room this shape? Why doesn't he die horribly when he lands? Anyone who follows me on Twitter will know how obsessed I am with the Metal Gear Solid franchise. And one thing I love, a little moment, tiny little moment, is in Metal Gear Solid 2, on the tanker, there's a moment where you come up to a corner and you see a guard's shadow, and it tells you that a guard's around that corner. It's utterly pointless because you've got the radar, but it's a really cool, dramatic moment. I remember when I played that game on PlayStation, it was so... It was just innovative. It felt really different and cool and awesome. And I liked the fact that a graphical effect, so the shadow, was actually relevant to the gameplay and actually kind of gave me some information. And I wanted to do that here. So again, shadows, with this level, the shadows kind of act as an early warning system, so you know that something's going to fall on you because there's a shadow being cast. There's no other point in the game where that relationship is quite so specific, but I love it here. I think it works really nicely, and I'm really chuffed with how it came out.
Why can't I jump? I can't jump with this character. No, come on. Did it bug? I can't jump. With any of them, right? Actually. Weird. What the fuck? You can't jump over here.
Anyone who follows me on Twitter will know how obsessed I am with the Metal Gear Solid franchise. And one thing I love, a little moment, tiny little moment, is in Metal Gear Solid 2, on the tanker, there's a moment where you come up to a corner and you see a guard's shadow, and it tells you that a guard's around that corner. It's utterly pointless because you've got the radar, but it's a really cool, dramatic moment. I remember when I played that game on PlayStation, it was so... It was just innovative. It felt really different and cool and awesome. And I liked the fact that a graphical effect, so the shadow, was actually relevant to the gameplay and actually kind of gave me some information. And I wanted to do that here. So again, shadows, with this level, The shadows kind of act as an early warning system, so you know that something's going to fall on you because there's a shadow being cast. There's no other point in the game where that relationship is quite so specific, but I love it here. I think it works really nicely, and I'm really chuffed with how it came out.
Yeah, I'm just gonna assume that was a bug. I hope.
So I only had like one opportunity left to do a character ordering kind of puzzle with this and the bouncing before Laura's taken. So I kind of, with this one here, it's interesting. It's kind of, hopefully the geometry kind of misleads the player, and you see a lot of people kind of working on a few different possible solutions before they work out the correct puzzle solution here, which is kind of exactly what I wanted. It kind of hopefully kind of messes players thinking up a little bit. And it's cool, and I think it works pretty well.
Had been the bait. She had a hunch that she wasn't needed anymore.
Yeah, I like the pairing of John and Claire. There's something quite nice because both of them are awesome and epic in their own fields. The ability to have big jumps and big cool moments, and we have a few of those where you jump up very high. And also there's that really subtle, obviously the power of Claire, which she can float. I really love. There's a nice moment here that I'm really happy with how it came out, which is where there's a submerged spike pit, and with a button above it as Claire, so you have to press the button and immediately move away in order not to hit the spikes. It's a tiny moment, but there's something that you haven't seen before, that kind of idea of Claire being in danger because of her superpower. And yeah, I think it works kind of well here. And this level's nice because it's kind of ponderous and it takes your time before the next level where I make people quite angry. there's not many timed challenges in this game, or levels with a kind of a cut-off point, or anything really that kind of forces them to be fast. This is one of them. It was a real challenge. It's a struggle for a lot of players because players try and do it at the same time with both characters, which is very, very nearly impossible. What you need to do is separate them out. And there's a problem here, I think, in terms of communication, that the player doesn't necessarily understand that they should do that, and will therefore become more and more. There's not many timed challenges in this game, or levels with a kind of a cut-off point, or anything really that kind of forces them to be fast. This is one of them. It was a real challenge. It's a struggle for a lot of players because players try and do it at the same time with both characters, which is very, very nearly impossible. What you need to do is separate them out. And there's a problem
honestly,
here,
and
I
I
think,
gotta
in terms of
criticize the
communication.
guy
The player
that's
doesn't
shit
necessarily
design. If I wasn't
understand
listening to this, I would have no
they
idea.
should do that, and will therefore
You-
become
you
more and
gave
more
no
frustrated repeating the same solution.
Inclination that was the.
So yeah, I'm not sure time
problem
puzzles
solve, you know?
are the best idea in this game, but it worked. There's not many timed challenges in this game, or levels with a kind of a cut-off point, or anything really that kind of forces them to be fast. This is one of them. It was a real challenge. It's a struggle for a lot of players because players try and do it at the same time with both characters, which is very, very nearly impossible. What you need to do is separate them out. And there's a problem here, I think, in terms of communication, that the player doesn't necessarily understand that they should do that, and will therefore become more and more frustrated repeating the same solution. So yeah, I'm not sure time puzzles
not
are the
Mr.
best idea in this game.
Super Meat Boy did that
but it
perfect.
works and it feels dramatic. And it's visually very cool levels, so I think it does a lot of things right. But maybe never one to underplay anything. I then repeat and do another timed level directly after the one that annoys everyone, which was an interesting choice. This is kind of this is a race against time. You do only have one character now, so it's less frustrating in that sense. It could have done with a bigger gap before it, but it works. This also kind of emphasizes John's never one to underplay anything. I then repeat and do another timed level directly after the one that annoys everyone, which was an interesting choice. This is kind of never one to underplay anything. I then repeat and do another timed level
you do
directly
repeat.
after the one that annoys everyone, which was an interesting choice. This is kind of this is a race against time. You do only have one character now, so it's less frustrating in that sense. It could have done with a bigger gap before it, but it works. This also, and this is the final moment of that kind of trifecta of mean levels. This one actually was designed to be frustrating, so I don't feel too bad about this one. This is, you're meant to really struggle to get to the exit with this. I wanted John to really fight to escape, even though, and this is something that happens a lot in Thomas, there's never any choice on the player's part. There's never any ability for you to choose where you're going next, say for a portal. I really liked the idea of creating an emulation of that kind of relationship with the environment. So the idea that John's racing to get away. There's no way the player can obviously get away, but I really wanted them to feel that kind of that stress of trying to succeed. And the main reason for doing that is that then once they do finally succeed, at that point they fail anyway, which is that kind of classic horror movie thing of work, and then fail ultimately, and that's hopefully leaves kind of an uncomfortable feeling. I really want you to feel bad at the end of this level. Hopefully
Why?
it's built up at this
What's wrong
point.
with you?
You've
the
lost
hell is
every
wrong with
character that you like, that's been introduced to you. This could very easily have been the end of the game, and I like the fact that the player is going to feel
How did
there's
I just
a
miss that?
definitive end to this section of the game. So
John
putting these
Holt.
challenges right at the end hopefully kind of achieves that.
He decided to jump the massive scary gaps for old time's sake.
Oh my God, I'm an idiot. It's not even that hard. Oh, fuck. John had gold. John people saying the achievements were glitched on this, but I don't see it. I keep dying, but it's not really frustrating because it's my fault. There we go, finally. Right as that comes up, I gotta jump. I keep doing it before I should jump. Alright, so it keeps forcing me to jump though. Like, you see how it's like elevating me?
This is James. He's another one of my favourite characters. He's intended to be the opposite of Thomas. He's kind of the anti-Thomas. This is something that lots of games do, and have the negative version of their main character. He's not evil. He's not mean in that way, but he's emotionally, hopefully, kind of the opposite. He's uncomfortable with the world. He's scared of the world. He's kind of. He's not a massive fan of groups of people either. It's established very early on that maybe he was bullied or he's uncomfortable around others. So hopefully kind of the complete inverse Thomas, which will become interesting when they meet. It's quite nice as well that he's physically the opposite of Thomas in terms of that he falls upwards, that he's got the anti-gravity. It's a nice way of bringing that mechanic in. And then little things like the fact that he's the opposite RGB value, which is a minor little nerdy thing to do, but one person in the world would realise prior to this commentary, and that's important, and that makes me feel clever at parties. I don't go to parties, I'm a game designer. All the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view, that's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people. All the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view, that's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels she's a superhero, which is cool. And with James, I really wanted him to have a different reaction to his differentness. He feels different in a way that's uncomfortable. He feels that he's weird and odd and strange, and that makes him uncomfortable around people. And that's all the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view, that's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels she's a superhero, which is cool. And with James, I really wanted him to have a different reaction to his differentness. He feels different in a way that's uncomfortable. He feels that he's weird and odd and strange, and that makes him uncomfortable around people. And that's all the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view. That's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels she's a superhero, which is cool. And with James, I really wanted him to have a different reaction to his differentness.
Dude, why
he
can't you
feels
just have where
different
it
in a
comes
way
from?
that's uncomfortable. He feels that all the characters are different in this game, and
Oh
that's
my
obviously from a
God.
gameplay
If I
point
gotta
of view.
hear
That's
this
sort of
through
the
the
point, that they're different. And I like that
They're all
different
different.
characters react to that
I love
difference
that they're
differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels all the characters are different.
So I'm gonna see Kino live. I'm trying to see Kino. The new Rivals season dropped today. They finally added new achievements to it, which was nice. I already got them all. The Angela one was easy.
In this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view. That's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, all the characters are different in this
Okay,
game,
I got
and
turned
that's
down.
obviously from a gameplay point of view. That's sort of the point,
Oh, I passed
that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her. All the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view. That's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels all the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view. That's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels she's a superhero, which is cool. And with James, I really wanted him to have a different reaction to his differentness. He feels different in a way that's uncomfortable. He feels that he's weird and odd and strange, and that makes him uncomfortable around people. And that's a valid response to feeling different, and it's one that you see a lot in the real world. And I kind of wanted all the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view, that's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels she's a superhero, which is cool. And with James, I really wanted him to have a different reaction to his differentness. I really wanted to start building in more complex environment interactions. At the moment, up to this point, you did something in the world and you were immediately saw the kind of the output, the payoff of that. With this stuff, this is more indirect. So this is you're getting knocked by one thing into another thing, which is dangerous. So it's a nice little, two-step interaction, which feels good and hopefully varies things up. Also, here the players still, and this is where Thomas comes back. I really ummed and ahed about how long I was going to leave it before you saw one of the original characters again. I was kind of worried that I wanted the loss to set in. I wanted the player to feel they missed those characters, but at the same time I kind of had to get it going again. And I didn't want to introduce these other world characters quite too quickly. I wanted to save Sarah, for example, for later. So bringing in Thomas at this point felt right. It kind of felt like the logical time. James has been established. The players got used to the fact that those characters are gone. So Thomas is a surprise. Here I keep them separated, but it's for a slightly different reason than before. It's not to limit the player or make them feel constrained so that the later kind of access to the characters is more fun. It's mainly to introduce anti-gravity and gravity simultaneously. In most games, when you change gravity, the gravity change is either directed by the player at a thing they want to change the gravity of, or it's universal, so everything falls upwards. So there's a chance that players at this point in the game, because they've only seen James on the screen and he's new, they don't make the leap that James has different gravity to everyone else. They might just assume this is an anti-gravity world. So having Thomas, I love this level. It's awesome. It's kind of jazzy. It's a playful environment. The aim here was to get things moving around, get blocks moving in quite a fun, silly way, and change the environment in a way that's not been done before. Kind of these constant tweaks and fiddles to make everything feel odd and changing. And so this is the first time the player has to use these two characters together in a puzzle. It's actually quite a long way into this chapter before you're required to do that. This is the first time. And you use them to stepping stone each other. Part of the reason for doing this is actually to begin the player's journey towards a much more complex mechanic, which is the idea of having the two characters standing on top of each other and basically negating each other's gravity, which is something that they come to later. There's quite a few levels where I kind of create these situations where you either half do it, i.e. stepping stone, or you might accidentally do it, which is hopefully going to happen a few times. Players are going to accidentally find themselves floating in space, and it's nice because I see a lot of Let's Plays or YouTube comments where people are like, oh, I totally broke this level by getting the fact that you could do that on top of each other, these two characters on top of each other, way earlier than the designer intended. I always intended you to work it out, and I intended for you to feel clever when you did. Sorry to burst your bubble. You're a lovely person, and I'm sure you're very, very good at computer games. But that's the intention, is hopefully. So this is another indirect level. This is a level where the two characters are not kind of directly interacting with each other. There's a symmetry as well. There's basically both characters going on almost the same moves. There's a few different variations just to keep it interesting, but predominantly they're progressing in exactly the same way. This is something I couldn't do very often. A symmetrical level with two characters doing exactly the same thing would not be very entertaining if it was done lots and lots and lots. But aesthetically, I just love the symmetry of this level, and I kind of wanted to have at least one level where I kind of acknowledge the fact that the characters are the same in terms of their jump heights, for example, and actually make a level where you're playing 2 levels simultaneously. Like I said, only something I can't do. It's not something I can do very often, but it was a nice thing to do just this once.
Immense ability he possessed.
Damn. It's in my elbow. Damn. Bro, I'm jumping and it doesn't register. Like, I'll click jump and it doesn't jump.
Thomas wondered why the cloud thing had brought them both here.
And this is taking that stepping stone idea a little bit further. So this is the idea that you can this is the idea you can use one character to move another, to act as a stepping stone for another, to help with jump distance. I think this level, there's a bit of bad communication going on with the moving platforms. The point of moving platforms is essentially to catch you if you get a character past the point where they're useful. There's certain places where you can break this level theoretically by moving the wrong character too far. And those moving platforms are kind of a way of backing out of that so you can get back into the game without dying. What the problem is, though, is up to this point all moving platforms are there to be jumped on. So players see the moving platform and immediately assume that's part of the solution to the problem, which is a problem with this level, and I've seen people get confused by it. It's an odd one because partially that's kind of cool because it means that it's a puzzle for them to work out, but also I think players feel a little bit cheated. They feel like they've been told to do something that didn't work. So that's one that I would probably tweak if I was doing it.
Yeah, is that what I'm supposed to do right now? That's fine.
This is a death tunnel, according to according to the file name. This is a cool one. I like this one. Basically, yeah, you have to use each character. It's a lot like the symmetrical level from before, but it's more asymmetric because of the movement of the pieces and the fact that there are safe zones you have to get the characters into. Otherwise, one will get killed while you're moving the other one. And it feels nice and it feels dramatic. Again, not something we can do too much in the game because people would get bored of it. But by doing this again, but with much more hazard, I think it feels kind of dramatic. The checkpoints here make this level far more fun, but pre-checkpoints this level was absolutely awful because you get to the end piece with those kind of chomping pieces, and if you just got one character accidentally placed in the wrong place, you have to go back to the start of the entire game. This was one of the levels which kind of playtesters used to talk me into bothering to put checkpoints in. I'm very, very glad that they did, because it's made the game a lot better. But yeah, it's cool. It's a nice, dangerous corridor. It's a good level. And this is the payoff. So this is the moment where all of that stepping stone stuff is actually used for a mechanic. So you have to float the two characters on top of each other through an environment. Hopefully by this point you've already worked this out for yourself. I actually chickened out a little bit, so I spawned the characters in the position of being on top of each other, which was a bit of a wimpy move on my part. If you mess that up though, if you break it, if you immediately change your position, that stone, that notch on the side is there to kind of help you back in. But yeah, it's hopefully it's a culmination. It's the point where the player feels they've beaten the game. They've worked something out a bit quicker than the game was willing to show them, which I don't know how often that works, but it feels like the right time to introduce this mechanic in terms of actually having to force the player to do it. And yeah, it's interesting. The gravity thing started off as a bug. It started off that basically the two characters, because obviously on paper I was like, oh, Thomas would be cool if he could jump, and it would be cool if there was another character that jumped the wrong way, the anti-gravity thing. But I never actually worked out what would happen if the two landed on top of each other, and it was only then when I got these characters into the game and put them together, I jumped on top of each other and realised that I love double jumping in games. It feels nice. It adds a kind of a tactical choice element to jumping, which is quite cool. And that's why Sarah's in the game. I wanted to get one of them in. She also kind of kicks up the tempo. She's there to introduce a new mechanic, which changes the way the game's played. But also from a story point of view, she kind of is the reason that everything gets pushed towards the climax it does. That she's basically there as an agent, pushing the story forward, setting up the goals of the characters from that point on. And she's also epic.
Chapter 6 of 10.
I really like the idea of getting a little bit of exploration into the game, so looking around and seeing what was going on. Obviously that's kind of hard to do in a puzzle platformer without the player kind of feeling like they've missed the point or got lost. And the idea of hunting for things became cool, and I had these switches, so I thought, okay, I'll make a level where you move around hunting down the switches and jumping on them in order to progress. And I made this level, but the problem is with the playtesters, they got lost. They got confused as to where they were meant to be going, what they were meant to be doing, and it frustrated people, and it didn't feel like a puzzle or a game level because it was so unguided and it just felt boring. The kind of the spotlight was a weird side effect. I'd made spotlights for another part of the game and then decided they weren't quite working and removed them. And this was a perfect opportunity to find a new use for a spotlight. So it's kind of moving around.
I should have double jumping.
At the start of the level, it feels like an aesthetic thing, and you look around, and then once you realise it's tied into where the switches are, it becomes a waypoint system kind of for that one level, just something to point you towards where you should be going. And you're still exploring a bit because you're working out your path to where you're trying to go to. There's a point where a switch appears on the bottom of the platform when you expect it to be on the top, things like that. But it kind of just guides the experience in a nice way. this puzzle here is about teaching the player to do something that's a bit counterintuitive. If you're not someone who's played many puzzle platformers, and to be fair, with some puzzle platformers this doesn't work. But something I really wanted Sarah to be able to do was this kind of slingshot move. So you would jump her in one direction and then use the double jump to push her back in the direction. Sarah was probably the kind of the hard character to write for, because she's kind of got this whole epic thing going on. She kind of feels, she should hopefully feel a bit Tolkien-esque, a bit kind of, a bit like she's walked in from Game of Thrones. I kind of wanted her to feel aloof and different to the other characters in the scene, kind of sort of like Thor, I guess, in the Marvel comics, that she just sounds a bit off and a bit uncomfortable around everyone else as a result, but doesn't realise how weird she sounds. Getting that right was really hard, making it so that didn't seem weird, or getting unintentional laughs from it was odd. I think most of the time we stay on just the right side, but it was a challenge, and it kind of distances her, which I quite like. I quite like that she feels kind of separate from the group. So with this level, it's really about kind of targeting a space vertically. This is something that I've not required you to do before, and you can't really do without Sarah. There's a gap that you have to get through, which if you get it slightly wrong in either direction, you'll die. And it forces you to really think spatially about where that jump's placed, where you use that second jump in order to keep yourself out of harm's way. It's teaching the player to finesse. Hopefully, it's teaching them to play Sarah in a way. This is a weird one. This level is an excellent example of something very odd that happens. I've talked to other indies, and it happens to most indies. When you're working in a studio, you're sat in a professional environment, an office, you're surrounded by pros, and you get the job done, and maybe you listen to music, but you just kind of get on with it. With Thomas, I built it at home, and I was sat next to my television at home on my computer, and I like background noise, so I'd put films on. And weirdly, this specific level I made while watching some obscure old Robert Downey Jr. movie. So for me, this level this is no insight on the game design, and I apologise for wasting your time, but this level always makes me think of Robert Downey Jr. And it's weird how those kind of it's a weird phenomenon that indies often, like bits of games that we worked on, will be coloured by whatever movie we had on or whatever TV show we had playing while we were working on that level. So this level
right
for me is Robert Downey Jr.'s level. No insight at all on the game design there. Wasting your time.
No, he's right on that. He's cooking with that, because there is some games where I'd be watching a series or like he said, a movie while watching it. Every time I think of playing that game, that was when I was watching my son, so you know what I'm saying? So he cooked with that.
So this is kind of the place where that balancing two characters on top of each other mechanic kind of gets made more complex. So you have a third character in it that you have to kind of factor in your choices, and you have to kind of carry one character across, switch, and take the other one back. You also can die to get the achievement there in the bottom corner. But it's really about just extrapolating on that concept that you learned and mastered earlier, and just taking it off in a different direction, and this time with Sarah to make that a bit more interesting. So this is the Fountain of Knowledge or Wisdom, depending on, on which bit of dialogue I'm using at that specific point. And this was a cool thing. I'm quite proud of this one. This had to be a big moment because this is the moment where Thomas kind of becomes self-aware. This is the moment where they realise the context they're in. They realise about the outside world, and it kind of establishes that. It's also a chance to do a really big, cool particle effect, which I'm quite proud of. Interesting little bit of trivia: the images that are flowing past there are the Twitter avatars of all of my Twitter followers who replied "yes, please" to a tweet from me saying, "Would you like to be in a particle effect in Thomas Was Alone?" So those are the true believers. I had way less Twitter followers back then, and yeah, it's a cool moment. It's also a really interesting moment for Sarah, because this is obviously Sarah's like objective and dream was to get into this fountain, and she is cruelly kind of separated out from it, and the layout of the level kind of forces her to watch the exact moment where Thomas achieves her dream and she doesn't. And the kind of the story does some fun stuff around that, but it's a nice kind of there's a nice kind of mix here of one character feeling awesome and the other character being, you know, feeling less awesome, and I think it works. I think it works.
Sad never got a 360 release because it says it got a release on Xbox or PS3.
'69 actually was an attempt to go back to that earlier level, the level I think I described it as jazzy, where the environment's changing, but this time let the player change their environment. So the player's kind of forming the level for themselves here. So you move the platforms into position by pressing switches, which allows another character to get to a new switch, which they can then use to get to a new switch, and there's a nice kind of progression and back and forth through the level. This was also, from a game designer point of view, this was a really fun level to put together because I had to work out kind of the geometry that would allow for this, so that you had this world changing but nothing broke and it looked cool in all of its formations, and it was a really fun level to make. I hope it's as fun to play as it was to make, because it was an interesting challenge to make all those pieces look good and move around in a fun way.
I've played, but they're probably good. I might check some of them out.
So building on the idea of the player kind of editing their environment, this was another idea. This was one of those experiential things where it didn't really come from a puzzle per se. It came from an idea that I thought would be quite fun visually and from a player perspective. So this is a box which gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you interact with it, and kind of compresses the player characters down in space. It felt really nice mechanically. I got into a stage with some of these levels around this area where it became about making the level really interesting in the way that it moved or changed, and trying to achieve kind of an aesthetic, emotive sense to these levels. Because by this point the player knows the mechanics, so I'm freer to do that. I don't do it much, and there's you've got to pace that with content which is perhaps. So these levels coming up, the objective here was to complete all of the character arcs, because as you know, spoilers, this is the point where we actually leave these characters behind, and all of them have a journey they have to go on. So I'll talk a little bit more as we go through, but essentially the first character to deal with is Thomas's journey, and no one gets this except for there's 3 or 4 people, and that's my failing. That's absolutely my failing. But what I was going for, what I was hoping people would kind of take away from Thomas is a creative. He's someone who wants to make well, he doesn't start off wanting to make stuff that's cool. He's very interested in the world. He sees things. He's observant. He's having fun just looking at the world. And then he kind of discovers that he doesn't like certain things about this world. And that's the point during these levels where he decides to change things. He decides to create something, and he creates these new characters who go on to achieve what he wanted to achieve originally. And it's nice. It feels like a nice kind of illustration of that creative process of kind of creative people tend to, at least the ones I've met, tend to be really, really interested in everything, and I kind of like it's not part of the process that I've really seen depicted, and I kind of like the idea of Thomas being that guy who has to know why that thing works the way it does, and is intrigued by the world around him. And I don't think the players necessarily realise that straight away, but I hope that during these kind of levels you realise that that's the journey Thomas has come on, towards kind of becoming a creative or a creator. So this is a chance to do something that I'm surprised I don't do much of in the game up to this point, and I think I would probably go back and do a little bit more of it. Is moving targets. Is having targets where time is a factor in the placement as well. So here it's really simple. I basically have two position sets. And you just have to move your characters into one of those sets, which is fine. What's interesting is because the sets keep moving, most players, as they're putting this together, lose track of which set they're trying to build, and that's where the puzzle comes in, is just paying attention to which layout you're attempting. Both are possible, obviously, but doing half of one and half of the other is not it's not going to win you the level. So it's a fun one from that point of view. That it kind of plays with players' perceptions a little bit. It's also quite a nice one-screen level. There's not many of these in the game, but I do like pulling them out every now and again. It's a nice way of mixing things up a bit, and aesthetically I just really like one level, one screen, and that's how the Flash game works, of course.
God damn it. Level hurting my fucking eyes. But how are you supposed to get it right there and get the square here too? That's bullshit. Oh my god. Okay, so I got 3 now. Boom.
So the other story to
She was
that
starting to hurt
needed
my
to be kind of
eyes.
continued and completed was this story of how John reacts to Sarah. Is that Sarah basically is John, but more so. And I really like the idea of him being massively intimidated at first by that and jealous, but actually that freeing him a little bit because he doesn't need to be insecure because there is someone who's demonstrably better at jumping than he is. And he kind of comes to terms with that and likes the idea of making other people feel awesome about themselves. He becomes much more selfless. He starts off very selfishly at the start of the game, and through his interactions with Sarah becomes the selfless character, which is really cool. And obviously at the very end of these levels where he's useless to this new, there are no yellow trigger zones later on. He is not going to be a part of this success, and he's kind of okay with that because he feels he's facilitated it and he's helped out with it. So that's a nice journey, and I like the way John progresses, and I like the way that his story ends.
Thousands of other AIs up there, unaware of their situation. Was there a way to help them?
mentioned earlier the how late the checkpoints came in, and that was a very late addition to the game, and I think I pointed out that was pretty stupid. This is the mechanic I added 2 weeks before launch. I was playing for the first time. I tried FIFA. I was playing a football video game, not playing football, and I hated it, but I liked the idea of a ball, and it kind of rooted in my mind. I wanted to add a ball to Thomas, and I didn't want to, it wasn't going to go in too many levels, but I liked the idea of having 1 or 2 places where it fit. And I knew that during these kind of levels, you have been with the same characters for a little while, so introducing a new mechanic kind of felt logical and felt like it would be good for the player's kind of sanity. So the ball obviously became a diamond because curves do not exist in this universe, and it became quite a cool little physics object you bounce around. It caused quite a few headaches in terms of the way character interactions work, because physics in Thomas is not realistic. It's kind of like, it's not realistic obviously because it's a video game jump, but actually more so than that in terms of when you carry characters, the fact they don't slide off you, for example. So there's quite a bit of tweaks and fiddling going on behind the scenes to make the game feel the way I wanted it to feel, and the ball kind of contradicts a lot of that. So it became quite a bit more challenging than I thought it was going to be. But it actually adds, I think, a lot to these last few levels with these characters. So this is similar to some of the stuff I do earlier in the game with multiple areas with different characters interacting indirectly. But what's nice about the ball was that it allowed me to make levels like this one, where you have different characters in different areas interacting with one object that gets moved around and passed around in different ways. And that was cool because it meant I could kind of separate the characters but have an object that moves between them. Because you don't directly control the ball, it becomes a kind of a passive object in the world that you have to interact with in interesting ways. It's basically kind of like, I guess, the companion cube from Portal, that it becomes something that takes on a meaning because it's something that's passed between different characters in this scene. So yeah, I really like this level. I never did get on the bottom right of the water, the particle effect kind of bleeds out of the wall, and I hate that. And I never got that right, and I never worked out how to fix that problem. So yeah, half-finished game.
Oh yeah, you see that at the bottom right, so you couldn't fix that. Took a little burn time this game. Fun ass game though, I do recommend it.